Hi, and welcome to Self-Determination in Individuals with Significant Support Needs. My name is Kathy Allure, and I'm a clinical support specialist for FAU CARD assigned to St. Lucie County. FAU CARD is a discretionary project of the Florida Department of Education and is funded by a grant from the Department of Education, which is funneled to us via the Florida legislature. The workshop is going to provide you with information on self-determination and individuals with significant disabilities. So just a little about me. I have been a clinical support specialist with FAU CARD since 2007. I completed both my undergrad and graduate degree work at FAU. I've taught in both Martin and St. Lucie County schools in a varying exceptionalities classroom. I previously started and ran a summer camp program designed for kids and teens with developmental disabilities. I am trained in the use and implementation of the picture exchange communication system. I'm also the parent of a young man with autism. My areas of focus are transition, law enforcement training, and support of individuals with more significant needs. FAU CARD provides support to families and professionals living and working in the autism community at no charge. Our vision is to provide support and assistance so that individuals are able to optimize their full potential, whatever that may look like. We provide consultative services, training, and support for all people regardless of race, ethnicity, or gender group with autism and related disabilities. FAU CARD's service area is Palm Beach and the Treasure Coast counties of Indian River, St. Lucie, Martin, and Okeechobee. We have offices in 3 locations: FAU's main campus in Boca Raton, FAU's Jupiter campus, and Indian River State College campus in St. Lucie County. FAU CARD's clinical staff have vast and varying experiences that they bring to their duties at FAU CARD, from early childhood to adult services. FAU CARD staff provides consultations for both families and school staff. Trainings and workshops are offered on a variety of topics, from basic autism awareness to more specific topics such as visual supports for the workplace. Trainings and workshops are geared towards parents and professionals, but some are geared specifically for teachers. Public education is another area we target for not only autism awareness, but FAU CARD awareness as well. Clinical staff can help with referrals to other community agencies and resources that can best meet the needs of each family or professional. Adult hangouts are an opportunity for the adults registered with FAU CARD to socialize with other adults who are also diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. For more information, please visit our website at www.autism.fau.edu. Here are the objectives for today's workshop. A history of self-determination will be provided. A few definitions will also be providing, but one overarching definition will be highlighted. The components of self-determination will be defined as well as described, and ways to teach self-determination will be covered. When you finish this workshop, you will understand the components of self-determination and also how to identify when a student is using self-determination skills. You'll also learn about different ways and activities to address teaching skills in each of the self-determination component areas. For the purpose of this presentation, significant support needs will be referring to those individuals who require more support in the classroom. An article published in 2005 in the journal Research and Practice for People with Severe Disabilities states, self-determination for people with severe disabilities first appears in the 1972 writings of Bennett Nergy, where he came to the realization that they could and should have a role in their own choices. Nergy's writings called for a wide range of actions that would enable them to better control their lives and destinies, including choice and control over personal activities, education, independence, participation in decisions, and information upon which to make decisions and solve problems. Nergy equated self-determination with the respect and dignity to which all people are entitled. He identified making choices, asserting oneself, self-management, self-knowledge, decision-making, self-advocacy, self-efficacy, self-regulation, autonomy, and independence as the most important or salient features of personal self-determination. He stated that every person, regardless of disability, should have the right to the dignity and respect all other people receive. Robert Persky, a contemporary of NRG and an advocate for the rights of people with severe disabilities, called for the opportunity for them to experience the dignity of risk. What's the dignity of risk? That's the right by which every person learns, the right to take a risk, whether we fall flat or fly high. NRG and Persky's calls for action to support the normalization principle, as NRG named it in Sweden, and the opportunity to experience the dignity of risk laid the foundation for the special education initiative, which we know today as self-determination. The Office of Special Education and Rehab Services, or OSERS, Deputy Assistant Secretary Patricia McGill formed a work group of OSERS employees to develop an initiative in 1988. That initiative was called the Self-Determination Initiative, and in 1989, it started a grant competition to identify and teach skills necessary for self-determination and in-school and out-of-school experiences that led to the development of self-determination. Many of the 26 programs that were funded focused on youth with severe disabilities. Some of those programs convinced the funders, as well as many in the field, that youths with severe disabilities could benefit from instruction in self-determination skills. There are some curriculums available to teach a student how to be self-determined, such as the adaptability instructional method. This is the first of many now available, and this one later helped to develop the method used and promoted by Michael Waymeyer, the self-determined learning model of instruction. For more information on the SDLMI Teacher Guide and Training, visit the KSU Beach Center for Self-Determination and Disabilities webpage. The link is in the resources section of this presentation. There are many definitions of self-determination, and they have undergone some revisions over the years. NRG supported the basic idea behind the normalization principle that people with disabilities should have a right to living conditions and an everyday life which are as close as possible to normal ones, and also to have dignity and respect. While Persky took it to a step further to say people with disabilities should have that right to dignity of risk. Dignity of risk simply means as individuals, we are allowed the right to make a choice or decision that someone else might see as risky. It could be a harmful risk, such as jumping off a cliff without a safety equipment, or a simple risk, such as choosing a food that our parent might feel is something we won't like, thus taking away our individual right to choose and to our dignity of risk. From the early definitions to those we recognize and use today, the concept of quality of life remains, and the other common thread among definitions of today is the term primal causal agent. Primal causal agent means the individual is responsible for making choices and decisions in their own life. And these choices and decisions are made with undue external influence or interference, meaning no one is impeding the individual's ability or desire to choose or decide. One definition states the individual is volitional in their choices, which means the individual is intentionally choosing or deciding on one thing over another. A good example of causal agency and volitional actions is choosing food at a restaurant, deciding what is wanted to eat, and choosing one thing over another intentionally. There are some arguments against an individual with significant disabilities being able to make a good choice. The definition of self-determination promotes and supports the choice and decision-making rights of an individual with a significant disability to be free from outside influence or interference. So for someone to be self-determined, he or she must be allowed to be their own causal agent with the right to dignity of risk, as previously supported by the self-determination founding fathers, NRG and Persky. Again, being allowed to experience a dignity of risk. Here are some misinterpretations of what self-determination is. In 2003, Agren and Waymeyer pointed out that self-determination is not a program or the way someone does something. Person-centered planning and individual control of service dollars have been referred to as doing self-determination in adult services. These efforts failed to recognize that self-determination is not about a way to do planning and provide services, but instead about enabling people to make things happen in their lives. Although these efforts are well intended, they are just tools to help persons with disabilities become self-determined. Self-determination, first, foremost, and always, is about self. It is about taking control over one's life to the extent possible or desired by the individual. Self-determination is an abstract concept. It's about empowering people with severe disabilities by providing skill instruction and opportunities to practice choice and decision-making so that they can obtain the outcomes they desire. It's about the concept of choosing and deciding over different options they have. It's about having the right to choose and make those decisions. Again, being allowed to be the primary causal agent making decisions about their own lives. In 1998, Michael Waymeyer and colleagues conducted a national survey of teachers who taught students with intellectual disabilities. The topic of the survey was to gauge the perceptions teachers have regarding the value of self-determination. From that survey, they reported 60% of the teachers stated they were aware of the term self-determination. Very helpful was the term they used when referring to student success in school and the value of teaching self-determination. And somewhat helpful was used when referring to post-school life and the value of self-determination. Teachers who were working with students with more severe disabilities were significantly less likely to rate self-determination strategies as important for their students to learn, which meant they were less likely to provide instruction to their students on self-determination. Teachers also stated several barriers to teaching self-determination in school. They didn't think students would benefit from instruction in self-determination. They also stated they had insufficient training and information available on promoting self-determination. They cited that they lacked the authority to provide the instruction, leaving the decision to school or district administrators to decide. They stated there were things that were more important to teach than self-determination. And they stated their personal knowledge of self-determination was a barrier regarding materials and strategies to use to instruct students in self-determination. The definitions of self-determination for individuals with significant disabilities are based on many elements of communication. Individuals with significant disabilities have the ability to manipulate the environment, and that ability is shaped by their past experiences. They have the internal drive and ability to make choices and act in ways to get those needs met. The individual does not have to have a verbal form of communication to manipulate the environment and get his or her needs met. Self-determination takes the locus of control and gives it to the individual and with the disability versus the professional, whether it's the teacher or a parent. In the past, self-determination has been characterized as a set of behaviors and skills that can be taught and depended largely on the individual's ability to communicate his or her intentions, wishes, or desires in a way that others could easily understand. A past common belief was that the communicative intent led to self-determination only if others in the environment understood the intent and then responded appropriately. Often, the individual's attempt at communication is misunderstood and even ignored, despite the advances in the need to support an individual's right to be self-determined. Loud attempts at communication and/or control can be loud in that the individual uses his or her behavior to communicate. Some attempts are quiet attempts at communication and/or control. What does a quiet attempt look like? It could be a shaking of the head or pushing away of the plate in order to refuse an unwanted or disliked food. Every individual has ways to communicate, even if the current communicative partner is not readily understanding any spoken words. How do we understand someone from another country when we don't have common spoken verbal language? If someone is making strange movements or look to be playing charades with us, we don't automatically assume the person is an incompetent communicator. No, we change our frame of reference and see that this person doesn't speak English, but it looks like the person is pulling down pants and sitting, so a light bulb goes on in our heads. Maybe this person is looking for the bathroom. We need to have the same perspective when interacting with someone with a significant disability. Don't automatically assume communication incompetence. First, change the frame of reference for the communication. Don't use a normative model of communication, but instead use a model that considers the intellectual disability the person has. That will make the facial movements and physical gestures more understandable and not lead us to believe the worst about the individual or his or her abilities. When attempting to communicate with someone who possesses limited verbal ability, relying or depending on a familiar communicative partner will aid in understanding the message being sent. Individuals with significant disabilities often are nonverbal or have such a language impairment that their message is lost on the person he or she is trying to communicate with. Providing nonverbal communication aids, such as visual supports, are helpful in allowing the individual to get their message to us. Behavior is also communication. A large percentage of all behavior has a communicative intent. Hand gestures are a readily accepted behavior when it's too loud in the environment to be heard. It could also be a form of nonverbal communication. When an individual is attempting to communicate with someone and the message is misunderstood, that can be frustrating for everyone involved. Example, a woman with autism, her name's Jane, was denied a cup of coffee. After being denied, she walked from office to office and smashed every coffee cup she could find. This is an example of loud behavior and could have been communicating a simple message. If I can't have a cup of coffee, then no one can have coffee. When frustration sets in, it becomes more and more difficult for the individual with a disability to get his or her need met. People engage in behavior for various reasons, such as to regulate sensory input, to control the environment, and to express feelings. So you're probably wondering, what does it look like to be a self-determined individual? In 1998, Michael Ward identified the characteristics of self-actualization, assertiveness, creativity, pride, and self-advocacy that an individual needed to be considered self-determined. He said that self-actualization was needed so that individuals would reach their full potential. Assertiveness is needed in order for the person to act in a confident manner and also in order to express needs clearly and directly. Creativity helps the individual to act uniquely. Pride helps people to recognize their ability and contributions to society. And an individual needs to possess self-advocacy skills so they can better access both the services and benefits they may need. In 1994, Sharon Field and Alan Hoffman defined 5 goals in their model of self-determination. These are similar to those that Michael Wehmeyer recognized as the elements or components where instruction would occur. Wehmeyer identified 4 characteristics that individuals needed in order to be self-determined. The individual should have acted autonomously. His definition of self-determination is acting as the primary causal agent in one's life and making choices and decisions regarding one's quality of life free from undue external influence or interference. Self-regulated behavior means the individual, again, was not acted upon by outside forces and initiated and responded to events, and self-realizing can both be interpreted as those volitional or intentional activities we engage in. The characteristics that Michael Wehmeyer identified are components or elements that will need instruction. The research that has been done by various individuals in the field of self-determination has told us that people who are self-determined will exhibit a set of characteristics that help to fulfill roles typically associated with being an adult. This list is just some of those characteristics identified. Those that are indicated in bold on this and the next slide are ways that individuals with the most significant support needs will demonstrate they are on the path to being self-determined. In an effort to explain and illustrate each of these bolded items, I'll use my 27-year-old son and the characteristics he exhibits as examples of how he exhibits each. First, a little about him. His name is Ian, and he has an IQ of 65. He is nonverbal, but able to communicate quite fluently with the PECS system. He exhibits PECS is Picture Exchange Communication System. He exhibits some repetitive and restrictive behaviors, and he is dependent on others for most of his personal care and to maintain his safety. He has also learned some leisure skills that he is independent doing. My son definitely knows what he likes and doesn't like, whether food items, clothing items, TV, or people. He told me one night that he wanted goldfish crackers. We were out, and I told him we would go to the store in the morning. It seemed he was going to compromise with me and wait. It was 8:45, and he came out of his room, picked up my keys, handed them to me, and proceeded to go out and get in my car. I hollered to my roommate, "Guess I'm going to Publix." Ian let me know exactly what he wanted, and I guess he felt he had compromised as long as humanly possible. He can differentiate between wants and needs, but he thinks he needs everything. He can definitely make choices based on his preferences, his interests, etc. He communicates with the picture exchange communication system, and he can communicate his wants and needs. He can tell me he needs to use the bathroom and that he wants Chick-fil-A. He is able to advocate for himself, but does this through assertive behavior. Assertive behavior is a component of self-advocacy that individuals need to demonstrate in order to get access to services and benefits they might need. So why not to get a desired item or access to a desired activity? Persistence is definitely a skill that Ian has an abundance of. Here's an experience that comes to mind to illustrate his persistence skills. Ian was engaged in occupational therapy at our home, and the OT was having him complete chores, and he had his PECS communication binder and a visual schedule present to support him. On his schedule was the task recycle. That meant he had to pick up the recycling items from the counter, go onto the back porch, which was down 2 steps, and he would hold the door jamb on his way out. So that meant he could only take a couple of items at a time. After about 3 trips, he went to his binder and requested to be all done. The OT said no, put the symbol back, and he did 1 more trip. He came back to his binder and again requested all done. He did that 1 more time and the symbol was removed. He made 1 more trip while loudly protesting and came back to his binder, and when he didn't see all done, he quickly made a goal revision and chose no. He said, "I want no." We gave him a break. He had persistently used his newly found communication skills and had not reverted to the old, faithful, aggressive behavior to get what he wanted. Definitely persistent. Self-confidence is a hard one to gauge with anyone, but I honestly must say that I have never for a minute doubted that Ian was a self-confident individual. He always seems very proud when he completes a task. Self-determination begins to emerge in children and adolescents across the lifespan as they begin to learn skills and develop attitudes that allow them to become causal agents in their own lives. These attitudes and abilities are the component elements of self-determination. There are essential characteristics that emerge through the development and acquisition of these multiple interrelated component elements. The following slides are going to look at each of the components and the developmental course required to learn each. The development of these components is a lifelong pursuit. Some of the elements are initially learned in elementary and continue to serve an individual well, like choice making, while others, like self-regulation, can be learned at any age, but most important to develop in the teen years for use in adulthood. Developing skills that help students become self-determined will ensure a better life outcome for the individual. For the purpose of this workshop, I will be focusing on those components that are in bold: choice-making skills, decision-making skills, problem-solving skills, goal setting and attainment skills, and self-advocacy skills. Choice making is the component of self-determination that is the most frequently promoted in the research articles and the component that is most widely known by special educators. Typically, people take the opportunity to make a choice for granted. Many individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities have been given very few opportunities to make choices based on their preferences or to even make a decision about events they go to or don't go to. Some people think they are incapable of making a choice, so they offer few opportunities, and some feel they know best because the communication method of the student is difficult to understand. Choice making is a concept that goes back to the principle of normalization we learned about during the history of self-determination. An additional benefit of teaching and encouraging choice making is the effect choice making has on challenging behavior. There is much research surrounding how choice making is a great intervention to help reduce challenging behavior exhibited by individuals with developmental disabilities. There are a variety of preference assessment methods available. A direct observation of the student is always a great approach to this. You get to see firsthand what activities, items, people, etc. they gravitate toward when provided with the opportunity for free choice. There are forms available that an assessor can check items off on, open-ended questionnaires that give you the category, but answers must be generated by the assessor. Not the best option because the answers generated are more the assessor's opinion than the preference of the individual. Forced choice preference assessments are a good place to start because it clearly gives two options and one must be chosen. So if you're presenting the student with the actual items or visual representation of the items, it reduces the number of pictures or items you'll need to have. Having too many options is often not as overwhelming for the student as it is for the assessor. Also, watch what the student does. His or her approach to an object, gestures towards it, affect about it, or verbalizations when in proximity to an item, physical selection of an item are the best ways to assess the individual's preference or interest. Ease and willingness to complete a task could indicate a preferred activity as well as time engaged with an item or on a task. The more time engaged with an item or activity, the more likely that it is a preferred item or activity. Once the preference assessment is completed, you can begin offering choice-making opportunities to the student via his or her preferences. This is just a few of the areas in which choice-making can be embedded across a school day. In this presentation, preschool refers to the exceptional student education programs that the public school districts have in place. Preschoolers usually have a snack time embedded into their day. Choice making can be embedded into the snack time routine quite easily. Some situations lends itself easier to embedding choice making. During snack time, the actual items are present, so it's the easiest way to present the choices. If the drink for snack time is usually juice, you can have the student choose juice or no juice, or give the student a choice between water and juice. If the parents send in snacks for their children, let them know that you're teaching their child choice making skills and ask if they will send in two types of snacks. Then you can present the child with two snacks to make a choice from. During center time, you can have the student use pictures of each of the open centers for the day to indicate where they are going. Choice making is embedded by allowing the student to arrange the center picks in the order in which they would like to rotate through them. For recess or playground time, let the student choose what items he or she would like to take out with them to play with. Have items available that are easy to use on their own, such as playground chalk, if not prohibited, various types of balls, hula hoop, scooter, jump rope, etc. For academic subjects, choice making can be embedded there just as easily. For science, maybe they get to choose their lab partner or project. Let them choose a book for the book report, whether it's from a list or a free choice. Magazines for free time reading is also a good place to put choice making. What to write with for assignments within what's allowed by the teacher, of course. If ink is allowed, let the student choose blue or black. If completing a map for social studies or a one-dimensional model for science, let them choose the medium, colored pencils, markers, paint, etc. When my son was in middle school, he was in a self-contained class, and during the morning meeting, date, weather, schedule time, each student would be provided with the opportunity to make a choice about what they were eating for lunch that day. The teacher had worked with the cafeteria staff and gotten pictures of all lunch items and would provide those pictures for the student to make a choice from. Pre-vocational skills can be varied in what is included as well. Choice making is a great skill to include in pre-voc activities. choice of what jobs they want to do each day. In my son's middle school class, his teacher had a lot of different jobs they could do during class period. She called workshop. The students could choose to make bows with her old-fashioned bow maker. They could make note cards with folded printer paper, an old salad spinner, and paint. The student could also choose the color of paint to use for their set of note cards. The list goes on and on. Once you get started thinking about where choices are naturally embedded for typical students, you will begin to identify opportunities where you can embed choice for your students who may need more support. One thing I want to say about reinforcement items. Once you have conducted the preference assessment, some, if not all of those items could be included into a reinforcer menu for each student. A reinforcer menu is a list of highly preferred items the student can earn for completing non-preferred activities. Just one more way choice can be beneficial in the classroom. Students can learn how to problem solve any issue they encounter through a Socratic questioning method. Socratic questioning is a form of disciplined questioning that can be used to pursue thought in many directions and for many purposes, including to explore complex ideas, to get to the truth about things, to open up issues and problems, to uncover assumptions, to analyze concepts, to distinguish what we know from what we do not know, to follow logical consequences of thought, or to control discussions. So in order to get students to engage in the four-step problem-solving process outlined here, teach them structured, systematic questions to help them develop problem-solving skills. Some sample questions that can be used throughout the problem-solving processes are: what is the problem? What do I need to find out? What do I already know? How will I solve the problem? Have I solved the problem? Does my plan make sense? Do I need to change or revise my plan if I didn't solve it? What have I learned? How can I use my plan to solve problems like this in the future? The Thinking It Through curriculum is one of several problem-solving curriculums that can be used to teach students with disabilities. They learned critical skills in this area. The curriculum addresses 6 areas that students with disabilities need to learn problem-solving skills within. These are areas that every individual deals with in their everyday lives. Dealing with emergencies and injuries covers things like when do I call 911 or go to the emergency room. Safety covers things like knowing not to go under a tree during a thunderstorm. Dealing with authority figures covers scenarios on dealing with your boss when you make a mistake at work. This curriculum outlines scenarios and the student practices problem-solving skills to resolve each scenario. The questions related to the Thinking It Through curriculum help students to identify people who can help them in solving a problem. When will the problem be solved? Help students describe what problem resolution will look like. Where would you or a friend look for help? This helps guide students to think of people who would be helpful in resolving a problem. Whom would you or your friend talk to? Helps to identify people the students would be comfortable discussing the problem with. A principal might be a person who could help with a problem, but also might not be someone the student would feel comfortable speaking to. What would you or your friend say? What does solving this problem sound like? This question helps students to understand what to say to help get the problem solved. Decision-making skills incorporates both problem-solving and choice-making skills in order to make a decision. After students have identified the problem, they will need to choose one of the multiple responses that were generated. The student could base the decision-making process on the Thinking It Through curriculum and identify someone who could help them to determine what the consequences of each of the responses might be. That would help them to actually make the decision. This method could help them be more confident in their decision, as well as learning skills to do this in the future. A quick definition of goal setting is that it enables students to determine and set a goal, then develop a plan to achieve the goal, and then monitor and adjust the goal or plan as needed. Adjustment is needed if along the way, some aspect of the goal or the entire goal has to be changed for some reason. The plan is also the way to monitor the goal for progress towards attainment of that goal. Part of the plan development should be to develop incremental steps to show progress of the goal. Some students would benefit from a more detailed list of steps for monitoring so they can see more progress along the way, or if they need to see progress in smaller steps and quicker than some other students. The idea that goals serve as regulators of human behavior does have some merit. If a goal is set, then people will perform better and expend more energy to attain it. If the goals are set clearly and specifically, people are more likely to experience success in attaining the goal. This specificity and clarity sets a clear path to attainment that some people need to be successful. The harder the goal, the more effort and persistence that goes into reaching attainment of that goal. Having goals will help people direct their attention and effort to the goals and activities related to attaining the goal instead of being distracted with non-goal activities. Goal commitment is a function of the importance of the goal to the person and belief that he or she can attain the goal. Goal attainment is linked to effective feedback on goal progress. When a goal setter receives effective and encouraging feedback on their goal progress, they are more likely to continue to completion of that goal. Teaching students to monitor their own behavior has proven effective with goal setting. The students would be instructed on how to self-manage before implementing it for the purpose of goal setting. Self-monitoring is just one aspect of self-management, another component of self-determination. Goals need to be appropriate for the students who are setting them. It will be obvious if a parent or teacher sets a goal for the student. So when teaching students goal setting and attainment, we need to guide them during the instruction process to be more realistic in goal selection. They can be encouraged to set something easy to start so they experience attainment success and boost their confidence to try something a little more challenging next time. The first step is to identify the goal. This could be an academic goal about something they want to learn. For students with intellectual and developmental disabilities, this could be a vocational goal of increased job skills, things such as resume writing, dressing, grooming, applying for a job, or interviewing. Writing the goal makes it real for the student. It also helps them not to forget it because it's visual. And it also serves as a starting point. If the goal needs to be refined in any way, that starting point, having the goal written down, is where you would start. Students will need to make sure their goals are not written in vague or broad terms. They need to make sure the behaviors and the outcomes are clear and precisely stated. Performance goals need specific outcomes described. Process goals need clarity as related to the process. Start dates can also be used with check-in dates along the way to ensure the student stays on target. Measurable goals makes progress monitoring easier and attainment known when reached. If working on a process goal, then percentage or number of steps in the process that are correct or completed can serve as progress monitoring. If a goal can be broken down into its component steps, it can serve two purposes. The goal breakdown can be used to monitor progress, and it can be used for instruction of the task. This breakdown of the goal is also known under behavior terms as a task analysis. Writing the goal in a positive format will encourage the student to strive for goal attainment. And future-oriented goals have the student looking to the future, whether it's a week, a month, or a semester into the future. The goal needs to be attainable by the student. Does the student have control over this goal? Can he or she modify or change the goal if needed? Is the goal too advanced? If the goal is too difficult to attain, will it lead to decreased motivation and persistence on the part of the student in terms of attaining the goal? Teachers should help students identify materials, resources, and strategies they would need in order to attain the goal. All resources need to be considered so students have a clear idea of what they need. For instance, materials that might be needed, transportation resources that might be needed to attain the goal or certain steps of the process, and/or peer and adult assistance. Have students identify how often and when they will work on the plan. How they will track how many hours they work on the plan will also need to be included. They can later use that data with the teacher to decide if they spend enough time on the plan. Self-monitoring is key. Self-monitoring is key to successful goal attainment, and the teacher can help identify a self-monitoring strategy the student can use. There may be other types of feedback besides self-monitoring that students can use for progress monitoring that can be explored with the teacher and would be specific to the student's goal. Teacher and student will need to meet periodically to review the progress of the goal. This can be more often in the beginning until the student is comfortable with the process of self-monitoring and collection of data toward the goal. Students can review all of their data from self-monitoring and any other feedback methods they might have to evaluate if they think their progress is adequate. They can also use this same information to determine if they need to revise the goal or even change it to something more attainable. This is a list of principles that can also be used as IEP goals for the implementation of these skills for a student with a disability. So the first one, at all grades, helps students work towards goals that are so specific that students know immediately whether or not they have been met. That's helping students. The next one is assisting students. And then it progresses through that way. And then you could use those as benchmarks for an overall annual goal. Self-advocacy is very simply the act of a person standing up for themselves. Self-advocacy and self-determination are often found to be used interchangeably, but they are not interchangeable terms. Self-advocacy is a component of self-determination, an important component of self-determination, but still a component. Having skills in self-advocacy enables students to pursue goals that are based on their preferences and also serves to keep others from making decisions about them and for them. A self-advocate knows the difference between being assertive versus being aggressive. They are knowledgeable about their rights and responsibilities. They are effective communicators and are able to negotiate compromise and persuade others. Self-advocacy has roots in all of the major social activist movements for rights and freedoms of different social groups. For instance, the civil rights movement of the 60s, the women's suffrage movement of the early 1900s, the labor movement, and in the 70s and the 80s, disability advocacy movement. Students can be instructed on self-advocacy skills through role-playing exercises. The topics could have a transition-related focus. Scenarios related to transition and the services the students would need both in school and out of school are good topics to use. Examples could cover setting up a class schedule, moving out of their family home, or meeting with a medical provider without a parent present. Behavioral rehearsal provides the student with practical practice using self-advocacy skills to make sure their preferences are being observed and to make sure that no one else makes decisions for them. Often, a parent may feel their child, whether an adult or not, does not have the skills needed to seek out medical advice or help, ask for accommodations at work, call and schedule transportation, whether to work or to a leisure activity. Teaching students skills of self-advocacy and allowing them to practice will provide them with the self-confidence needed to go beyond the practice sessions and to put theory into practice. Another way to learn self-advocacy skills is to join a group that teaches students self-advocacy skills. There are any number available. Some even have an online meeting format. SUFI, or Stand Up for Independence, is a local group in the Treasure Coast counties of Florida, and they hold monthly meetings and attend the Developmental Disability Day in Tallahassee to advocate at the Capitol for services to meet their needs. Florida Self-Advocacy Central is the self-advocacy communication hub for Florida. Lots of information is available on their Facebook page. Florida Self-Advocates Network D started in Miami-Dade and was formed to expand the self-advocacy movement in Florida. The Florida Youth Council is a program of the Family Cafe, an agency that holds the Florida Statewide Disabilities Conference every year. The Florida Youth Council is a group of youth and emerging leaders aged 15 to 30 with disabilities or special health care needs that live in Florida. The Florida Youth Council, or FYC, is all about getting youth and emerging leaders involved in self-advocacy, peer mentoring, and other activities that will improve the quality of life for youth and emerging leaders with disabilities in Florida. The program provides a means for youth and emerging leaders to problem solve the issues, make decisions regarding important issues to express to their state and local communities, and to develop strategies to solve them. There are a number of curricular resources that teach self-advocacy. Standing Up for Me is available from Project 10, an agency that has a strict focus on all things transition. There is also one or two listed on the teaching resources at the end of this presentation. Assertiveness is a skill that will need to be taught to individuals who hope to become the best self-advocate they can possibly be. Strategies to teach assertiveness are not new. Modeling assertiveness is important so that students see the difference between assertive versus being aggressive. Allowing time for the students to practice what was modeled through behavioral rehearsal helps them to learn by doing. Providing reinforcement or contingent incentives for accurate attempts at demonstrating assertiveness will help them learn to be assertive. Reinforcement will increase the likelihood that the behavior will occur again. Providing feedback and coaching to students after they have engaged in behavioral rehearsal could lead to more modeling of the behavior being taught to help refine those skills. If the student is in need of more practice, that can also be provided through some homework assignments. Another means of progress monitoring of assertiveness training could be the use of self-monitoring. We discussed it during problem solving, and it could also be useful during assertiveness training. At this time, I need to read you a code. If you need a certificate for this training, you will need to enter this code at the end, probably when you do your survey. Capital C, capital A, 042021. Again, CAA 042021. I'm assuming this is case sensitive, so make sure CAA is in capital letters. CAA 042021. Assertive behavior is important for being a good self-advocate. These are some very discrete or precise skills that a student would need to learn in order to be a competent self-advocate. When I refer to a competent self-advocate, I mean that the student is assertive in their attempts to get their needs met. These are just some of the areas that a student would need to learn to be assertive in. This chart is a comparison of what outcomes of assertive, non-assertive, and aggressive behaviors looks like. We want to ensure the student is learning to be assertive, not aggressive. Students need to learn about their rights and responsibilities in order to self-advocate for those rights. Here's a list of basic human rights that every person is entitled to have preserved. Students can also read through their state statutes in relation to developmental disabilities to learn more about their rights. Each state should have a statute that pertains to that topic. In Florida, Chapter 393 of the Florida statutes specifically addresses developmental disabilities. Here are some resources related to self-determination for use by teachers to instruct students in self-determination. The first is the course description for self-determination from the Florida Department of Education. The second is a great resource that was developed by Michael Waymeyer and colleagues on teaching self-determination. This is a guide for teachers. There is a training on the self-directed learning model of instruction that can be accessed by contacting the Beach Center at the University of Kansas. Here are the resources that were cited for the development of this presentation. Here's the contact information for FAU card. If you would like to contact me directly, you can reach me by emailing me at callore, CALLORE, @fau.edu. You can also reach me by accessing the FAU card website at www.autism.fau.edu and submitting a request for services. Thank you for attending this training. You can access our training calendar for other topics by visiting our website as well. Thank you.